Shocking images. Mengyu in the forbidden footage. The vision that shattered the industry had arrived without warning. No one knew who had captured it, or why it had surfaced now, decades after Mengyu had vanished from the public eye. The footage was brief but unforgettable, a flickering portal into a world that blurred the line between reality and dream. Those who first viewed it described a strange mixture of awe, fear, and fascination, as if the screen itself had become a living organism, breathing with the pulse of its subject. Mengyu appeared, yet he was not merely the actor the world had known. He was distorted, fragile, ethereal, moving through a space that seemed both familiar and impossible. The initial frame alone was enough to silence a room. Mengyu lay reclined in dim, shifting light, his eyes half closed, pupils reflecting a labyrinth of colors no camera should have been able to capture. The shadows around him writhed as if alive, flickering in response to his slightest movement. Observers reported hearing faint whispers beneath the static hum of the footage, murmurs in a language that felt both personal and universal. Some claimed the sounds were their own thoughts reflected back at them, emotions rendered visible and audible. The industry was immediately in turmoil. Critics, scholars, and fans clamored to view the video, debating its meaning and ethical implications. Was it art? Was it a record of a dream? Was it a warning? No one knew, yet all agreed. The footage held a power unlike anything seen before. Even those who had studied the original lost footage, the one that had inspired the Fifth Flight movement, recognized a new layer of intensity. Here, Mengyu was no longer a symbol of reflection alone. He had become a conduit for raw, unfiltered emotion, a mirror to every fear, every longing, and every hidden corner of the human heart. Master Menglong, now aged and revered beyond measure, watched the footage privately in his mountain dojo. His hands shook slightly as he pressed play, and for the first time in decades, he whispered, "He has gone further than even I imagined." Every frame made his chest tighten. The unnatural stillness, the flickering colors, the way Mengyu's gaze seemed to search not outward, but inward, into the soul of whoever dared watch. Jianlong later described the experience as a collision between memory and eternity, a vision that left him both terrified and awestruck. Among viewers, reactions varied wildly. Some were mesmerized, claiming to feel a physical pull toward the screen, an irresistible force guiding them to confront suppressed emotions. Others recoiled, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity, the sense that the images themselves were alive and observing. A musician described hearing rhythms in the flicker, subtle pulses that guided his hands to instruments he hadn't touched in years. A painter claimed that the shadows in the footage taught her about negative space in ways no art school ever could. Every encounter reshaped perception, as if Mengyu had orchestrated the footage not for spectacle, but for revelation. The most unsettling aspect, observers agreed, was the ambiguity of Mengyu's state. He was neither entirely awake nor asleep, neither entirely present nor absent. Some frames suggested pain, yet it was pain transformed into something transcendent. Others depicted serenity, yet it carried the weight of decades of unspoken truth. Viewers reported that lingering too long in the images induced a dreamlike trance, during which memories and fantasies mingled until they were indistinguishable. Psychologists cautioned against repeated viewings, yet even warnings heightened curiosity. No one could resist. The footage sparked a global wave of artistic experimentation. Performers attempted to replicate Mengyu's gestures, choreographers mimicked his pauses and micromovements, and musicians composed in response to the subtle rhythms hidden in each frame. Yet no replication succeeded. Scholars concluded that the footage was not merely a visual record, but a living artifact. It responded to the emotions of the viewer, shifting imperceptibly with every glance, every heartbeat. Some theorized that Mengyu had encoded a kind of consciousness into the very fabric of the film, a presence that could only exist within perception itself. Fans began to document their experiences in real time. Online forums filled with accounts of fleeting visions and reflections, shadows that seemed to mirror the footage's distortions, and dreams that replayed frames in impossible combinations. Pilgrims traveled across continents to experience the footage collectively, often gathering in silence. Lights dimmed, hearts synchronized. Witnesses reported a phenomenon they called the resonance, a shared awareness where emotions were amplified across the group, tears and laughter blending into a single pulse of collective empathy. Master Jianlong cautioned his students to approach with respect. He emphasized that the footage was not entertainment, nor was it to be treated as a spectacle. "It will teach what you are ready to learn," he said, "and no more. Watch with humility, or it will take from you what you are not prepared to surrender." The students obeyed, sitting in quiet circles, absorbing the pulse of each frame, learning to see without consuming, to feel without breaking. Those who approached in this spirit often emerged transformed, carrying an unspoken understanding of empathy, timing, and presence that reshaped their own artistry. The footage also began influencing cultural production worldwide. Filmmakers embraced ambiguity, abandoning rigid narratives in favor of emotion-driven sequences. Writers explored interiority and subtlety, capturing moments of pause as profoundly as moments of action. Composers layered sound and silence to reflect the flicker and cadence of the footage. Dance became less about athleticism and more about presence, microgestures, and the conveyance of feeling through motion alone. The lost images of Menglong had become a blueprint for a new aesthetic, one that demanded attentiveness, emotional honesty, and courage. Yet, even as the footage inspired awe and innovation, it remained terrifying in its intimacy. Observers reported sensations of being followed by shadows, whispers echoing long after the screen went dark, and fleeting glimpses of figures in mirrors reminiscent of Menglong's flickering forms. Some feared it, yet fear itself became part of the learning. Only by confronting discomfort and uncertainty could one grasp the footage's subtle truths. Scholars, artists, and students alike concluded that the footage was not meant to provide answers, but to provoke recognition, the recognition of what it meant to be human, vulnerable, and fleeting. Decades later, the footage became an icon not of scandal, but of revelation. It was preserved carefully, studied endlessly, and its influence permeated every corner of creative life. The Fifth Light movement, already inspired, the world didn't move on from the forbidden footage. It grew around it. Every city seemed to find its own copy, every culture its own interpretation. Screens flickered in galleries, phone screens, subway tunnels. Some people swore that the footage could not be downloaded or stored, that it appeared only when the watcher was ready. Others said the file rewrote itself in silence, each version slightly different, as though Menglong were still alive somewhere, editing eternity. Scholars from 5 continents formed the Institute of Echoes to study its effect. Their laboratories filled with heart monitors, EEG wires, and screens that pulsed like living eyes. They found that every viewing triggered a slow synchrony of breath and heartbeat across an audience, as if the film itself were conducting their bodies. One experiment documented an entire auditorium breathing in perfect time for 13 minutes after the credits ended. No sound played, only the afterimage of Menglong's gaze lingering in the mind's darkroom. Not everyone could bear it. Some left halfway through, overwhelmed by a rush of memory so intense they could not separate it from the present. One critic wrote, "It felt like the film had reached inside me and pulled out something I had forgotten I once loved." Another simply wrote, "Too close." But others returned again and again, claiming that each viewing peeled away another layer of their own blindness. They described the experience like diving through mirrors. The first reflection shows the surface, the second shows fear, and the third shows light. Meanwhile, the art world bent around the footage's gravity. Painters began abandoning pigment for shadow. Sculptors shaped air currents instead of stone. Composers stopped writing in notation, choosing instead to describe silence in measures of breath. The footage had redefined creation itself. The Fifth Light no longer meant a philosophy. It was an atmosphere, something people inhaled. One evening, a small theater in Kyoto decided to project the footage onto mist instead of a screen. The vapor moved like memory, and for a moment Menglong's face seemed to form out of breath alone. Hundreds watched without sound. When the mist dispersed, no one spoke. They simply bowed to the empty air, certain they had seen not an image, but an apparition made of empathy. The recording of that event circulated widely. Even those who saw it secondhand felt the pulse of reverence embedded in the silence. Master Jianlong, now confined to a wheelchair, was invited to witness one final projection. He traveled down the mountain at dusk, wrapped in his old training robe, carrying the candle he always lit for Menglong. The theater lights dimmed. The footage began. For 13 minutes he sat unmoving, eyes glistening, breathing the same slow rhythm he had once taught his students. When the screen finally went dark, he whispered a single phrase: "He has finished the lesson." After that, something strange began happening around the world. Reports surfaced of spontaneous light patterns appearing on walls, matching frames from the footage. In Shanghai, a subway tunnel briefly shimmered with the same colors captured in the original leak. In Lagos, a power outage left behind faint silhouettes that flickered like the footage's opening scene. In New York, a digital billboard glitched for an entire hour, displaying only Mengyu's hand reaching toward the viewer. Technicians called it coincidence. Poets called it haunting. Soon, entire communities began organizing vigils. People would gather at dusk, project the footage on clouds, on rivers, on snow. They called the ritual the mirror hour. No words were spoken. Participants claimed the silence created a vibration in the chest, a sensation of recognition that felt both alien and holy. Children born after the phenomenon's rise grew up knowing it as a myth, a film that sees you back. Yet each new generation found it again, rediscovered it, and added to its legend. By the 50th anniversary of its first appearance, the footage had become humanity's shared memory.